controversial subjects with the facts can be tense, but we are Ace Up Science here to make things make sense.
Hello, Lauren, our queen, aka LaurDIY on YouTube, but we know her as Lauren. Okay?
We're on a first name basis, actually. Thank you for coming to the pod.
Hello. Hi, guys. I miss you guys so much.
Yes, we're separated by a giant mass of land and a bunch of anti-vaxxers and anti-maxxers all the way between, probably.
Yeah, 100%. Love that for all of us, except for not.
Yeah, exactly. Well, at least we're starting to come out of this. I don't know when this pod's coming out, but hopefully by the time it comes out, we'll be even feeling more optimistic.
Love it. Yes, please.
Well, because Lauren is originally from Toronto, but she's what we call a traitor, and she decided to move to Los Angeles, La La Land, for some frickin' reason. I don't know, maybe 24 hours a day sun. Imagine. No, 12 hours a day sun. 365 days a year sun.
Get your vitamin D. Also, I really was like, I knew this was coming, but I just didn't think it'd be in the first 2.5 minutes. So here we are. But I was prepping for
the
getting
Toronto traitor
this
subject.
It comes up always, every single time. But also, you guys thought about coming here for like a few months out of the year.
That's we did, and then a global pandemic hit, and we had to
raise home.
Right. Oh, that's right. Oh my God, that's right.
We saw you right before we fled.
Yeah, truly, right before we escaped America, we had just seen you.
Oh my God.
I want to just make sure for anyone who doesn't know, give us your like 1-line, 2-line spiel. Who are you? What do you do?
Oh yeah, true. I feel like I never ask you this. Yeah. What's your deal,
I'm
Lauren?
also so bad at like giving a bio. My name is Lauren, or otherwise known as LaurDIY on YouTube. I am like a DIY and lifestyle creator, and also host and executive producer of HBO Max, which is HBO Max of all of the whole platform.
Yeah, she owns HBO.
Of Craftopia on HBO Max and Crave in Canada.
Yes,
nice.
Queen of HBO Max.
Yes.
I love that. You moved to LA, you got to take over all of HBO Max.
I have the whole platform.
I love Craftopia. Oh my gosh, speaking of, we're talking about anxiety. I love it so much, and then I also get so much anxiety for the kids on it. And I'm like,
do you get anxiety?
Like, I'm so curious about, like, they're so talented and so cute. And
They're
some of them
so
have to go
cute.
home.
And I also feel like at that age, you haven't worked under that kind of pressure, because like being on a competition show, like you're working to the clock, right? And like, they're so young, they're on set with their parents, which is really cute, but like still like working under that kind of pressure is like I had anxiety watching them have anxiety because like, it's probably like one of the biggest opportunities they've ever had in their entire life, and they're so excited, they're so enthusiastic, and like we had a few criers who just got so overwhelmed, they had a little breakdown, but they'd be like crafting and crying, they'd be like, I just don't know, I have no time, and it was so sweet. Oh my God, they were so cute.
Well, speaking of all that anxiety, you've chosen anxiety for our topic today. What is your relationship to that? Why did you want to talk about it?
I'm a big ol' anxious bitch, and it's honestly like part of my brand at this point, that not that I I'm not making anxiety a commodity, but I've just been so transparent about my anxiety journey, because I think without it, on like the outside, you would just be like, oh, like you live in LA, you make YouTube videos, like you go on vacation, and that's just like not the reality of my life. Yeah. Like it just controls every element of what I do, and it's been something that I've has up and downs, ebbs and flows for the last 10 years. I've been on a handful of different medications. I've tried a bunch of different therapies, and I just feel like I've been around the block many times with it, and I try and advocate for normalizing it and just making it more of a common thing.
That's amazing. And like, I think it's funny because on this podcast, I mean, in life, I'm also, out of the two of us, the very anxious one, and everyone who watches and listens is like, always knows. But I see a lot of people relating, and I think it is important to be able to talk about it openly, and not to say you don't get anxiety.
No, I know. Obviously. I feel so weird because I'm like,
you're a normal human who has a normal.
Like if I go near the side of a cliff, I'm like not going to jump off. Like anxiety is like helping me, like not like, I'm anxious about certain things. Okay. But by definition, like Nature magazine's definition is anxiety is characterized by excessive uneasiness, apprehension, or dread. It can be generalized or be directed towards specific things, usually imagined or exaggerated threats. And then an anxiety disorder, which 7 million people in America have, which is like an incredible amount. It means you have excessive anxiety more days than not for at least 6 months. So it's that parameter that I start to check out and say, like, I don't.
Right, you don't.
But so do you guys both sort of feel that? Like, it's that, like, I'm just now asking you guys questions because I'm like, I know I don't feel that. I don't feel that.
Yeah, I mean, I personally for sure do. Like, it is something that, like, it's the first thing I think about when I wake up and, like, the last thing I think about before I go to sleep. Like, it's something that is just, like, so, like, encompassing. And so, like, one of the big parts about therapy and medication for me is that it helps be more manageable, but it really does control, like, so much of my day and, like, what I can and can't do. But yeah, Mitch,
yeah,
what's
I
your
would say
experience?
like, because obviously there's like a rolling scale of where people fit, and I have never been officially diagnosed, and I have not used meds. Yes, there's been times like I go to therapy and I have talked about whether or not it's worth it for me or whether it's like the right decision, but I never have. So I also like try to tread the line of being like, I don't want to overexpress that I'm anxious, but I'm definitely a neurotic person, like overthink things all the time and have a lot of tendencies that most of my friends would say like I'm an anxious person, even though in many ways, and I'm sure for you as well, many ways people on the outside in would be like, you're totally confident, you have your amazing work ethic, you're motivated. Like there are these traits that of course, like you can be more multifaceted than just being anxious.
Totally.
But definitely it's a thing that I just realize more and more like controls so much of my life, even when I don't realize it.
So when you say the
Right.
first thing you think about when you wake up and you go to sleep, like what? I'm genuinely curious, and I don't want to be the annoying person who's like, so what's it like to have anxiety? but
Must be fucking nice.
I'm just like, what does that mean? Like, I'm so annoying when I wake up. I'm like Pepin 9-Step. I'm like, gonna have a shower and maybe I'm gonna like go pick some dandelions. But like, what does that mean?
So like I have a generalized anxiety disorder that like comes with a specific phobia. So for me, it's called emetophobia, which is like an irrational fear of like feeling sick, throwing up, like feeling out of control when you like. Yeah, so like the same way that like a sneeze is kind of like involuntary, right? And like it's not something you ever think about, but like just say you had like an enormous fear, an irrational fear against sneezing, you'd be like, when is it coming? Am I gonna sneeze today? Like what will happen if I sneeze around other people and how will it affect them? So that's like a metaphor for like how people kind of like cope and deal with like emetophobia. So like it's avoidance of a food. If it ever makes you feel sick, it would be potentially avoiding like a really spinny roller coaster if that's something that you know you can't handle or makes you dizzy, because you're like, oh, this will make me dizzy and that'll make me feel sick, and then what if I throw up? You know what I mean? And then it goes down a whole other line of like, what if I get sick, I need to go home, but I came to Disneyland with all my friends and then I have to make everyone else leave early and I feel really like, you know what I mean? It's just like a chain reaction of events. So again, like meds and therapy make it more manageable, but it's like the root cause for me is like an irrational fear that is again irrational, and that's like the hardest part, is that like when you think about it, you're like, if your body's gonna throw up, like you're just gonna throw up. And like I've had food poisoning in the past, and like the throwing up portion is, I don't mind it, you know what I mean? Like it happens and I'm like, oh, I just threw up, like whatever. But it's like the anticipatory anxiety that can control people's life when there's that specific phobia. And again, super irrational, because you're not gonna die, like it's not the end of the world, but it can have such a hold on your life.
Yeah, it's so interesting.
That's such a good way of explaining it. That was
and
interesting.
so much of it is a fear about the fear about the anxiety. Like it's not necessarily the thing, but it's like, am I gonna have a panic attack in a situation? Like randomly when I was younger, I had panic attacks. My first one was while I was driving on the highway in a car, and you know, you kind of think you're dying or something. And then every time I was in a car, I would be like so stressed, being like, if that happens again, you're like scared you're gonna spiral or get in a car accident or something crazy is gonna happen. And so ultimately then the car starts to be like this trigger that can either trigger you into a panic attack or just have you being afraid of it the whole time.
Yeah, 100%. And like that's a big thing too with like avoidance, is that you have to find the balance between like for example, I'm an anxious traveler, but I love being on vacation and going places. So like I just have to kind of like push myself to like get on an airplane and like go on adventures and stuff like that, because like I value the vacation more than just avoiding that for the rest of my life.
Wow. So a lot of this, it says, is controlled by your amygdala. Here I am trying to tell you guys, like, and your hypothalamus. And so it kind of makes sense. It's a really important part of our brain to like be anxious and to try and like, you know, understand threats in life. That's like how we stay alive as humans. And so it is a really fascinating concept because it's something that our brains do well, but I guess, and we now know in our lives, it's like very complicated. There are some genetic components to it. And when it comes to like a lot of the studying of anxiety is through OCD, which is an extreme version of it, where they find that the serotonin, like within the synapses of your brain, they get it's called like SSRIs are serotonin reuptake inhibitors. So what happens is that the serotonin's getting taken back into the original neuron too quickly. So the serotonin's actually not staying in the like synaptic cleft for long enough. And that's what happens in OCD, but it's likely what's going on in parts of people's brains with generalized anxiety disorder. And that's why people go on SSRIs, so that in theory, the serotonin literally stays in the cleft for longer, to fire for longer. So it's like an interesting way when you look at the neurology to like validate and be like, okay, this is like a genuine like disease in many ways for our lives now. Like there are neurological reasons why these things like happen. And like, it's just so interesting because it's such an important thing. But then when you hear about like, I'm so happy you're able to go on vacation still. And I'm sure there are people who just like can't. It really gets painted as this like dark thing in our society, but it's also like really important. You know what I mean? Like in a way, it's just like such a weird balance. And there's also so many unknowns. There is a genetic portion. Do you guys have relationships like with your parents where you're like, oh, maybe they're anxious too? Like, is it something you feel you can relate to with your families?
Yeah. So my dad is like has never experienced anxiety. And so like a lot of like my anxiety relationship with him is getting him to understand the difference between being stressed, being nervous, and being anxious, because I feel like those like obviously can all go hand in hand, but are entirely different. So again, It like comes back to like the irrational portion of it, because he's like, well, how can you get up on stage and speak in front of 10,000 people, but you're so scared about getting sick when you leave the house? You know what I mean? Like, so it's having him understand that there are severe differences, and it comes, I'm sure, from different parts of the brain and how it's all wired. But my mom is definitely very, very type A. And so I think that if she had gone through the same life experiences that I have, and not to be like, I have so much trauma, but like there's been a few like major events in my life that have, I think, wired in a weird way to create these irrational links to things that have happened. And so we always say that like my mom and I are so similar that had she gone through the same experiences, she very well could have ended up in a similar position.
So
wow,
do you
so
see your mom like expressing that anxiety, or do you think it was like the combination of like the things that happened in your life that like made it express, or are you like, oh no, my mom has the same kind of anxiety?
No, I think it's more just that like I like just working through therapy, like, you create, you link things together where you're like, oh, like I see where this started. Yeah. I see like how I created this as a pattern in my life. Because she's more of someone who's just like can get stressed easily, but not someone who really, really has like debilitating anxiety the way that like I would describe myself.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I know. I've always, like, I definitely think I can see, I feel like I got different types of anxiety from each parent. But neither,
a nice like, little blend.
Little swirl.
Yeah. And that's what I mean. Like, neither, I don't find, like, I am an anxious person. I don't think it's, like, overly severe. Like, there's not, actually, there are cases when it is, like, debilitating. And weird things around like claustrophobia or fears of being in certain spaces and being like stuck and stuff. And I'm sure those like are not exactly anxiety, but kind of are.
No, they are. Agoraphobia is like one of them.
Yeah, I guess it's just like irrational fears ultimately come down to like an anxiousness where exactly the same thing. I'm like, I can stop and like rationalize that it's not something to be afraid of. But yeah, I see from my mama more like I'm weirdly neurotic about the way things are, right? So it makes me anxious if things are not a certain way, and it's so nice when like the house looks a certain way or like everything's organized a certain way.
Doesn't help that I'm a slob.
And then like for my dad, it's like the neurotic anxiety of like thinking about things too deeply, like over worrying about what I'm saying or if I'm bothering people around me. Like I have like a really weird like noise anxiety. Like I hate to feel like I'm disturbing people that are in the neighborhood or like, and which is challenging with Greg because he loves loud noise. He is a loud person, but also like loves blasting music and just living life. And it's a quality that I aspire to and love. Yeah. But if we're in a park, he's going to want to have music.
A speaker. Playing. And I'm going to have worked on that playlist for 3 days.
Right. So you need to hear it.
Yeah. But I'm like, but not everyone.
I have headphones on with my own playlist, sadly, while Mitch like listens to birds. And I'm like, I'm having fun over here. Can't hear ya.
Oh my God. But yeah, I feel like, do you feel like it's something you've known most of your life, or has it evolved and changed?
This is what made me think of something kind of funny is like, I don't know. I'm not going to say that your parents aren't in therapy, but just like there's a generation where now we're all in therapy. And I'm like, it's crazy that all these boomers are just walking around absolutely fucked up. And
With
it's like
trauma.
Yeah. Like, they're all like, sometimes you like hang out with like a group of people like your parents' age and they all talk and you're like, y'all all need, like, we are so lucky that this is like now something we all do. And it's like normalized because I'm just like, they all could deal with a little smattering of therapy, at least a couple months.
Yeah, no, 100%. Wait, what was the question again with therapy? I lost. I got caught up in the smatter.
Yeah, I lost it as well. What were we talking about?
I think I just fully interrupted everyone.
No, it's fine. We were talking about loud noise.
No, you were saying like have you known this like your
Oh,
whole
yes,
life, or was
yes.
it through therapy that like just like your journey of
I think this is like common for a lot of people, is that you kind of hit rock bottom and you're like, oh, I need like actual help. So it's something that I was like, like debilitating anxiety. I'm like, okay, this is when I need to start like medication and talk to my doctor and go to a therapist. But again, talking to a therapist, like I can now recognize like very early signs of like experience anxiety that I just hadn't put a name onto when I was younger.
Wow.
So like, for example, when I played soccer, when I was like, I don't know, like 10, maybe even younger than that, 8 or whatever, like I would be nervous and anxious about like if there was going to be a bathroom on the soccer field, because some of them did, some of them didn't, and like what if I had to pee, and like the anticipatory anxiety behind that.
Wow.
And so like I think about that now and I'm like, oh my God, you have been an anxious bitch since day one.
Oh my God. Yeah, no, that's really good example.
Have the words for it.
Like I didn't know where I was going to whip my dink out and pee. I wasn't thinking about that.
Yeah, right. And so you think back to that, and it's like that's not a normal thought for like an 8-year-old to be having.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, Greg,
it's kind
do you
of like
feel
adult and mature in some ways, though.
But I'm trying to think like that. There may be ways that you express anxiety that are just different than.
Okay, yeah, I shouldn't just paint myself as this like laissez-faire, like you know, what I mean?
And not to like. We don't need to like throw so much.
No,
out
no,
there,
I kind of like want
You want me to read
join.
you on? Or you want me to read you on the pod?
Yeah, read me. What you've known me for as long as I've known myself.
You definitely have anxiety around. It's weird because like you gravitate a lot of attention onto yourself, but you also like in other ways hate to have the attention on you. And you
yeah, that's a psycho
also
trait
like you have struggled with like vulnerability. So like to me that's a form of anxiety where like if you have to get like connected to someone in a certain kind of way,
I get
it makes you
anxious.
really uncomfortable.
Yeah, and I can relate to the feeling of like losing control. Like I can't control it. Like I have certain friends who will like look deep in my eyes and like, like I don't even know.
Like, I love
I don't
you.
even know. Like I always think of like gift giving. Like I love getting gifts, but like you know, they're like handing the gift and looking in the eyes and being like, I appreciate you. I'm like, well, I'm gonna barf, and like it's so sad because this is like a beautiful moment, but I'm like, I actually am gonna like fart and be like and like hit you in the side of the arm like too hard that you like fall over and be like, shut up, you don't bitch, or something like stupid like that. Yeah, so that is it. That's anxiety. I'm like literally sweating. I'm like, okay, wow, okay. So that is a form for sure.
The study I have is about social anxiety. Do you feel like you have do you get anxiety around hanging out with people or meeting people or going to parties?
It's so funny because we've hung out at so many like events.
That's like
that I feel
I
like we've been anxious at, or we can only be. It's like YouTube events where a bunch of YouTubers in a room. Sorry, but like anxiety cinch.
Yeah. Well, so I'm lucky in that social anxiety is not something that I really, really struggle with, because I actually see more like I understand how that's a little more rational than something that is based in like one specific fear. You know what I mean? Like it makes sense that it's like overwhelming to go in a room of new people and like you have expectations of like what you should be doing, what you need to be saying, stuff like that. So like I always understand a little more because that feels like it, and obviously this can happen to an extent where it is not normal and it is something that like should be talked about more. But I'm just lucky in the sense that like I don't have the same level of social anxiety. It's more like if I were to walk into a room of people, I have more anxiety about knowing where the exit is and knowing where the bathroom is than actually having conversations.
Right. So socially, you're like, yeah, because you are so social and you like you seem super comfortable.
So it's almost like because going into a situation of new people is sort of causes anxiety for everyone. Like everyone, I think, can relate to that.
Totally.
It makes it easier for you to deal with because you're kind of like, that makes sense. But then when your anxiety that you're speaking about, it feels, you almost can like tell that it's irrational, and it almost makes it like worse, kind of.
Well, yeah, 100%. Because I'm like, bitch, there is going to be a bathroom at a party. Like, there's just no room. And like, if you walked in a door, there is an exit. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like that's what's so frustrating is that like my brain has just made these connections that lead to anxiety and panic and, you know, like potentially a panic attack. But like, you can rationalize it in a different part of your brain. I'm sure like you guys can break that down, but it just, you can't alter that like connection that you've created so strong in your mind. Like it takes, so like with my therapist, we're doing a lot of like breaking the links that I've worked so many years to create these irrational like kind of like paths that my brain goes from like point A to point B. And so it's you know, the neuroplasticity of my brain and being able to rework that.
Yeah, that's what's also, I'm so happy we also live in a time where they're like, oh, your brains aren't set in stone. Like you can change them. Like people can have strokes and come back and like literally move their bodies. Whereas before they'd be like, oh, sorry, you're actually just not gonna be able to move your arm. And it's like, then the people just accepted that. Like it's so great that we, like your therapist is able to like have that vocabulary, and we have that neuroscience now to be like, no, our brains are so much more of a muscle that we can work in a different way. It's like, just so happy that science has come to a place where we can know that.
But I'm curious,
and it's like, encouraging. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was gonna say, it's like encouraging to know that too. Like when you're in therapy, it's nice to know that like when you're doing exercises and working things, it's like you're working towards like feeling like quote unquote getting better is attainable because you know that your brain can do that.
I always say that with therapy because like I go to therapy. I have been for like 7 years. I mean, I'm saying here, I don't have a generalized anxiety disorder, but I say it's like, it's like the gym for your mind, and your mind is the way you perceive the world. It's way more important than your biceps. Sorry, bros. But like, you know what I mean? It's like, if you're going to the gym every day to like get a thick ass, which like I'm trying to do, here comes the summer. It's like, I should spend just as much time trying to make my brain function the best like it can. You know what I mean? Like they're all, I like to look at them as muscles that you can have neuroplasticity with, and you can make a change because it just makes it, you know, easier to go and not have to always be like, oh, I have a problem. It's like, no, it's like the gym.
Totally.
It's upkeep. Yeah. What were you going to say though about your study?
Well, first I was going to ask, so something that I have experienced through therapy, and I'm curious your take on it, is whether like, do you feel like you can see checkpoints in your life getting quote unquote better, or do you feel like what's your, because some people say, you know, you always, like, it's almost like being an addict where like you never become that, you always kind of deal with a substance addiction for the rest of your life if you've had it. And sometimes I wonder like, okay, is it more about managing the problem, or is it possible to kind of like move beyond it? And do you have hope for that? And I know like none of us are actually like psychotherapists or professionals, so just this is our anecdotal experience, but I'm curious what you think about that.
I think both. Like, I think like the goal on a day-to-day basis is managing it, right? So it's like when you're, you know, you're social a few times a week, you work, you have normal like due dates for things that could cause a little bit of stress. So it's navigating just like the day-to-day. But I think there are also like bigger like checkpoints, as you refer to them, that you have more like tools in your tool belt to like get through it. So like most of the times too, traveling will make me feel anxious. But if I've got, you know, 10 different techniques that make you feel more in control of your anxiety, like I think that helps kind of like get past that checkpoint of being like, okay, I felt anxious, but I knew that was going to happen. And so here are like the 10 different things that like helped manage that anxiety while I was like going through that checkpoint. Like, and I think it's also tough. Yeah, to minimize that and make you feel, because I mean, so much anxiety is rooted in like the need to feel like you're in control. So I feel like when you learn different techniques to like help manage it, it gives you a little bit of sense of control back, which can be really motivating. But I also think too, it's frustrating because like for me, I did a medication switch maybe like 3 or 4 months ago. And because I wasn't on the right medication, like I was in such a bad place. And even just being on the right medication, the shift between what I can do and what I can't do is night and day, like literal night and day. So it also comes down to like the chemistry as well. If you're adding or taking things away with different medications, that can like have such a hold on making these checkpoints attainable and like the day-to-day management of it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, because like something I find, I don't have any personal experience with meds, and I have always wondered what that would feel like. And especially, I've heard people telling me their experience of finally finding the drug that works for them, and like that must be a frustrating experience, I'm sure, but also just like so uncertain when you're not sure. Like, is this working? Like, do I feel better? Am I feeling the right things?
Yeah, like playing with like what does it feel?
Yeah,
so
and then also
interesting.
knowing what is the final goal. Because I think that's where I get stuck in my head is I often feel like I end up back at the same places over and over and over. And then I like get down on being like, oh, I've been like listening to all these like podcasts and listening to all these experts tell me all these tools and tips and stuff. But like, and now, it's become a lot more around like,
so you mean like,
knowing it will happen again and then being prepared as best as you can, but just kind of seeing it as a cycle. And I like having like back problems has ironically helped me because I realized like as I've started to become more fit and work with people to help me, they were like, you're not probably going to get rid of this, but like we'll minimize how often it happens, how bad it happens when it happens, and how fast you recover from it.
So you
and
mean like,
that's a good metaphor.
You're talking about like the therapy when you're in it, you sometimes get down on yourself because like when you then like end up in a bad place again, you think it's not working or something.
Yeah, it's not like in the therapy, but it's like doing therapy or listening to people talk about like things and
like when they're like,
do
do journals, and I journal for a week and then you stop jourling and then you get sad and
you journal for a week.
Oh, you journal for a week and nothing happens.
And you're depressed or you're anxious and you're just like, ugh, I'm doing all this freaking work and nothing's changing. And I know, I think if I look long enough retrospectively, I do think I've changed a lot and grown a lot. But obviously there's parts of me that I'm like, okay, these are either baked in or just like so learned that I need to like take a long time. It's like fitness where you take like years and years and years to see like true results if you want.
Unless you move to LA and all of a sudden just get hot somehow.
Truly, there's something in the LA water. Okay, I'll bring up my study. It is more for people who have like social anxiety, which I feel that I do.
I know what I have anxiety. I have FOMO anxiety.
Oh yeah, you have FOMO.
Is that a form of social anxiety? It's like
I think so.
If other people are socializing without me, I want to like show up and just like kick them. I've loved this pandemic. I'm like, all my friends are locked at home legally. Like, this has been good for me.
I'm not missing on a single thing.
Do you have FOMO?
I have FOMO sometimes, but I also am like queen of bailing on things because I get anxious.
Yeah,
so
that's
sometimes.
But you seem so okay. Now I'm putting things on both of you. Okay, but now here's my turn. As someone who has anxiety about FOMO, no, but it's like I feel like you just like you both like have this like ability to kind of like enjoy your time like at home and like you like build worlds. I just think of your beautiful home and you just seem like you have such a great time there. Like I don't know why. I just feel like you guys don't have FOMO.
But here's the problem is that like I build an incredible space and home for myself because I'm anxious to leave. Like this is my safe space, right? Yeah. So like if I spend so much time at home, like I almost think that doing that is detrimental towards my anxiety. Like I should make my space shitty that I don't want to be here to like force me out of the house.
Wow, that's so interesting. Okay.
Like when I make it so like safe and homey, like obviously that's like the goal. Like you want it to be safe and homey. Yeah. But sometimes I feel like it's counterproductive because it's so much fun to just stay at home on my couch and watch a movie.
But then, so what if there's a group of your friends hanging out? Are you having FOMO or are you more like my house is so sick? Like I'm just sitting at home watching a movie.
I go back and forth, and to be honest, it would really depend on like how I'm feeling mentally on the day. Like if I was feeling really, really good, but I just like didn't get an invite, I'd be like, oh fuck, I'm missing out. Yeah. But like if I feel really shitty, I'm like so grateful that I'm like, oh, like I would be like socially failing in this situation.
Wow. Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, I feel that way too. Like obviously, I think everyone feels if you're not invited somewhere, that I don't know if that's FOMO. I feel like that's like you can get hurt by that. You know what I mean? But
that's your hit on your ego.
Yeah, exactly. But FOMO, and I think you do have this, is when like you could have been somewhere, but you for some reason aren't there. Maybe you had two obligations.
Oh yeah, and then
it's not like you weren't invited, and then you're like, I could be at the beach with my friends. I'm gonna go insane.
Yeah.
Or I'm like, it's like, yeah, I'm happy to be at home.
Yeah. It's so weird. It's like it's not like it's something that like it's only like while it's happening. Like I don't like it's a weird thing where like the next day like I don't actually like it's not like I look back on like let's use the beach as an example. I was like that was the best day at the beach. I was like oh just a day at the beach. Right. Like it's so weird. It's like the next day if I wake up and say like all of my friends were at the beach and I wasn't, I won't care then.
Yeah, that's
like
fair.
It's like a weird like in the moment thing.
I have the opposite problem. Like I don't go to the beach because I'm like it's just a day at the beach, and then I never go.
Me
and
too.
then I'm like, oh fuck, I guess I probably should have gone to like one day at the beach.
Yeah.
Oh man.
But
okay.
this is social anxiety for people who
Social
don't even
anxiety,
want to go to the
okay.
beach.
So basically, I'll try and sum this up quickly. It was like a really cool study, but basically people who have social anxiety in previous studies, they realized through like brain scans and surveys that they are way faster to interpret body language cues and dialogue as negative, even when they're not. And like literally like firing in their brain. So something that somebody would say that's innocuous, not rude, not geared or anything like that, they would pick it up. So this study tried to look at faces specifically, and they basically got people who were anxious and people who weren't, and were comparing them with controls, and would change a face morphing from happy, and then they would like do a face swap to it being like angry or upset or sad, and like see what would happen. And it was the people who have higher levels of social anxiety would shift way faster to recognizing the negative emotion.
Wow.
So, and I relate to this because I think I also overthink. I think it's like in some ways I think it's a skill, because sometimes understanding how other people think and feel is like very, very useful. And like in so many assets of life, like being able to know when somebody has like the slightest bit of resentment in their voice or doesn't
Oh my God. Yeah, that makes me like, that just made me anxious thinking about that. I'm like, oh my God, they hate me. They hate me. They hate me.
Exactly.
Oh
Like I feel like, and there's been times that self-perpetuate it for myself. Like I'll say to Greg, like, I'm pretty sure that person XYZ didn't want to do that, and you're like, no, it was fine. And then later we'll find out like, okay, they clearly didn't. I was like, see, like I knew that little twinkle in their eye was that thing. But then I am just like, I definitely, that overplays itself for me all the time, where every day I'm over analyzing things. I don't like think people hate me, but I think I like overly read into
And
cues
that's
of body
that's
language.
intent. That's such a good study, because it's so interesting, because it takes the joy out of socializing if you're able to like really pick up on the negative energy of people quite easily. It's a good thing in some cases, but it also takes the joy out of socializing when a bit of negative energy is in any specific space. Like that's going to be inevitable. If that's something you can pick up on and focus on really easily, it's going to make it like just like
amplified.
less fun. Yeah.
Right. Also, like medication wise, like, so I was on an SSRI, so like the serotonin
Reuptake inhibitor.
Re-up inhibitor. Yeah.
Second S.
Oh yeah, what is a second S? Selective serotonin reuptake.
Oh, selective. Yeah,
because it's not
what it
all
is.
serotonin. So, yeah, okay.
Yeah, so I was on an SSRI for like 9 years, and so because my body like obviously started growing an intolerance to it, like after 9 years, I kind of maxed out the dosage. I tried just like a different SSRI. It wasn't right for me. It wasn't the right fit. And my doctor referred me to a psychiatrist who was able to like kind of do this like brain test where they were able to kind of measure where I have like deficiencies. So I did a test that basically told me that
Were you like wearing something on your brain, or how did they test you?
No, it was saliva, blood, and fear, I think.
Okay, so they were just like analyzing what's in your body, what's going on.
Yeah, what's going on, right? So then they were just like, oh, like you metabolize serotonin at like a crazy pace, so like an SSRI is probably not the best fit for you.
Wow.
And they were like, okay, you've got two major channels in your brain where things happen. It was a sodium channel and a calcium channel.
Yeah.
Okay,
and
chemistry major.
Yes, there is.
Thank you. This is how many brain problems I have that I'm like, show me the science.
Wait, this is so cool. Keep going.
And so like essentially there's two channels that are supposed to be like a certain size, right? And so my channels were both fucking wide open and shit is just like bang, it's like just flying through it. So like my brain, that's why like I always feel like, because I described to my therapist is like, I feel like my brain is moving at like 1,000 miles per hour of every minute of the day. And so they were like, okay, well you should do this test, like that'll really confirm like what's going on. And so like a lot of the times there'll be like a deficiency, or also the word is not defect, because that feels too negative. But what do they
Like
describe it?
intense.
Like that feels like you're broken.
So
that feels
it's like
you're
the
broken.
ion channels in your brain are
Like
big.
more reactive, and so you're like shooting out
Yes.
more. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So I tried a medication approach where they tried to just like lower the overactivity in my brain. So it's called gabapentin, and then also lower my heart rate. So tried to like approach it from that angle. Didn't work for me. Didn't love it. Didn't work. But you know what was is that it made me feel a little bit too dead.
Chill. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's
Yeah.
a lot of people struggle with that. Yeah. I know a lot of
Yeah.
comedians who are like, you know, they're like, my job is to be funny, but I'm depressed. And then they go on that and they're like, well, I'm not even like able to be myself in a way. And it gets scary.
Right. And so what I will say about SSRIs, because I give this advice to so many friends who are, like a little nervous to start something like that, is that it doesn't typically cause like a major personality shift. Like a lot of the times, and so I describe it is that like if the sun is happiness and therapy and all of the good things, but your anxiety is like a cloud cover. For me, an SSRI just helped like clear that so that I could see more clearly. I could like receive the therapy and like really take it in and use that to like help me manage my anxiety. And it's something too that happens so over time. So like you don't really notice that things are different until you get 3 months into it and you're like, oh my God, like I've done so many things that like I wasn't able to do 3 months ago. And so it's not something that just like punches you in the face and you're like, oh, I'm not funny. I'm devoid of personality now. And so anyway, so I ended up switching over to an SNRI. So norepinephrine, I think, is the N.
Selective Oh, wait. I wrote something about that. Selective norepinephrine reuptake inhibitor.
That's what you said?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry.
Thank you.
We have a little fact checker over here.
Welcome to the ASAP Science podcast hosted by myself, Laura Science.
Now there we go. Lore science. We got to give you that.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So you're on SNRI.
Right. So then I felt that when I came off the serotonin portion of it, that I was struggling with depression. So even though it might not have been attacking my anxiety in the right way, like it was obviously managing the depression side of like mental health. And so the norepinephrine was explained to me as if it lowers the fight or flight reaction that comes with anxiety a lot of the time. So, I mean, I've had a great time on an SNRI, but it took a year's worth of like really, really rough struggles of transitioning to find the right medication.
Wow, that's such an important story. That's so interesting.
Really good advice.
Yeah, very personal and like.
And it's intense for someone's first time going into it. Like it's nice to hear somebody else describe it and be like not that it's just been a positive experience, but anytime, even trying like trying marijuana for the first time or trying anything, you're like taking that leap is really scary because you're like, I actually just have no reference point of what it feels like. And I think oftentimes with any kind of medication, people kind of picture that immediate, oh my God, is it going to change me completely? But it's like so much more nuanced than that. And especially with modern day science, it's like it's hopefully able to allow you to just thrive in life and minimize those bad parts.
Yeah, absolutely.
Does anyone use like Calm app or any of those like anxiety app things? Like, I don't.
I have before. Personally though, like I find there's like this one breathing app where it's much more, and like I'm like a highly visual person, and so maybe this is why it's more effective for me, but it's one of those apps where it's like you breathe along with like if there's like a little blob, it like expands while you breathe in and comes down, so it helps you control. Because like I can be someone who like goes into hyperventilation when I'm having a panic attack, and so this just like forces you to be mindful of like your breathing pace so that you can get more air to like your brain to come out of it.
That reminds me so much. There's a game, if you have a Switch, or it might be on other platforms, called Celeste, and it's about a character that has anxiety, and you are that character going through all these obstacles and challenges. And one of them, like in the middle of a fight, you like have to focus on this feather and like play the game by like moving your hands, and it's like so calming. It's honestly one of the best games I've ever played. I think it was rated the best game of last year. So if you like video games,
Mitch is a gamer, spelled Gaymer. Gamer. No, that's cool because, okay, I was reading a study about how those Calm and like Mindscape apps, only 3.9% of people make it past 1 month. And that doctors who have like severe anxiety and burnout actually really benefit from these apps. But they all, I think it was almost like, it got even lower after 3 months. So there's like these apps, they find work, but people
it's like
don't.
Retention.
They're trying to figure out how to create financial incentives and like in my head I was like, Candy Crush fine? like how do you like make the app, because that's what they're realizing. They're like, it actually works, but there's like, I mean, like obviously this isn't sponsored by Calm, they don't want people to know this, but like in general people are buying it and then like just stop using it, and it's like they haven't figured out how to create a longevity with them that actually works, even though like based on initial studies, like really intense stressed out doctors who use it do have less stress, but then they just stop using it. So I didn't know none of us here have used it. Okay, interesting.
I've used it like a few times. I mean, the hardest part is that things that you have to like really take a chunk of time out of your day, even if it's just like 15 minutes.
I know, exactly.
Like, there usually isn't any kind of like drastic payoff. And I feel like when you commit yourself to one of those things, you're like, oh, why don't I feel like completely peaceful and zen after
Yeah,
this?
exactly. And you're like on your phone or something. I'm like, I feel like that's the wrong place to have the app.
Right. Or like when I have a really hard time shutting my brain off to like the level that they want you to. And so they always say like, oh, just like follow your thoughts as this happens. But sometimes I'll zone out so hard that I've already planned the next 2 hours of my day with a to-do list.
And you're like, oh shit.
You know what I mean? So like, it's just not for me. It's just not for me.
Yeah.
The Calm app is actually your like list and notes app. Like secretly.
Like
Literally.
you just go through all your anxieties. Yeah, my take on that is that there will always be. I find it useful, and I think as I've aged, I've realized you kind of have to go with the flow. That there's always kind of different tactics and new things that come into your life. So you might use Calm for a month, and it might work for a month, and it's okay if after a month you're bored and you kind of need something else. And I feel like that's just the evolution of like. There's something called hedonic adaptation where you just get so used to like, you know, buying a fancy car is so exciting at first and then it just becomes so normal.
Yeah, there's hedonic adaptation to our anxieties.
I think there is. So I think
Yeah.
it's just like also for the mechanisms and tactics to help you with anxiety.
Yeah.
So like sometimes I get frustrated because I'm like, oh, this was working, but now I don't use it anymore. Why did I stop? And it's like, okay, it's time to find the new one that gets you excited and motivated. And
That's like
feeling
my
better.
therapist for FOMO. Whenever we talk about it, she's like, so you got some sort of FOMO every once in a while. I'm like, I know, but like, let's fix it. And like, it's just like one of those things where
I hate that part of therapy.
Yeah,
I'm
they're like, well, like it's not
Fix
like,
it.
so what? You got a bit of FOMO, and you're just like, isn't that bad? They're like, well, not really. Like it's just like I like that part of therapy where they're like, that's life, and you're like, I guess that's life. Like I can't be like
My therapist,
perfect.
he literally says, they're like, okay, so what if? And they're like, now what? And I'm like, you tell me what. Now what? Now what
I'm
happens?
here. I'm paying you.
You get the what if all the time.
Always.
Yeah.
And then it goes, and then what if? And then you answer,
And then what? Yeah.
what if? And you're like, okay, well, fine. When you put it that way, I guess
Yeah.
it's not that big a deal, but. Oh my God. Well, thank you so much for coming on the pod, Lauren. I feel like this has been probably so helpful to so many people listening. It's just nice to talk about it openly and honestly. And yeah, where can people find you? Obviously all over the internet, but what
on
do you,
HBO frickin' Max.
you got a podcast as well?
Oh yeah, shout
Got a
out your
podcast?
pod.
So the pod that I do is Wild Till 9, co-hosted by my boyfriend. It is much more vulgar and less informative. You know, it's a different kind of education. It's a different
Yeah, are
kind
you
of
kidding?
It's a cultural life
Yeah.
education.
it's more of a cultural sex, dating, relationship podcast. But no, it's a good time. And then just like YouTube and TikTok and all the social media platforms.
Yes, absolutely. TikTok. It's where
TikTok.
it's consuming all our time.
Oh my god. Speaking of anxiety, it's like that's what I get anxiety. It's like when I've been on TikTok for an hour and I throw my phone. I'm like, where did the time just go? And like
Genuinely, oh my God, it's like crack.
it is literally like crack. And then I'm like, what did I get from that? Like truly nothing.
I know there's so many times where I'm like, oh, Greg, I learned this cool thing on TikTok. And I'm like, I do not remember it at all. I start to tell it and I'm like, I actually fully forget it because it's
It's
a
so
30-second
funny to
thing.
watch you just be like, I don't know what I'm talking about. Okay, it was a TikTok, and then we just like move on. Well, thank
you so
you.
much
We
for
love
coming
you. We
on.
miss you. Come back to Toronto soon, please.
I know, love you, miss you. Come to LA soon.
We will. Once the restrictions lift, we'll come visit.
I think it's actually safer to be here than it is to be in
Now.
Ontario
Yeah,
right now.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Yeah. You guys
We're
have done a
maybe
great job.
finally in the right direction, but yeah, once the first snowdrop falls here, we'll come visit.
Yeah.
Yay! Okay, thanks
see
guys.
ya.
Bye.